All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of 300 to 3000. I am one of your hosts, Spencer Sutton, and I'm joined with me by my co-host, Matthew Whitaker. Matthew, welcome back to the show.
Spencer, I'm glad to be back. And today, usually I would say I'm like really excited about the person I've got on. Today, I'm really nervous about the person we have on. Yeah, nervous is probably the right thing to say. We have an operations and maintenance expert. Deb Newell is here, and she runs a consulting business to property managers. And I've kidded her that she needs to come in and fix all of our problems here at Evernest. But if we hired her, she would fix all the problems, and then this business wouldn't be fun anymore. So we are here to figure out what her secret sauce is. And listen, we've heard amazing things from her clients in the property management world. And so we're really excited, Deb, to have you on the show.
Thank you, guys. I really am happy to be here.
Matthew,
Spencer, it's nice to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks, Deb. Matthew, is this your way of getting a free consulting, like an hour of consulting?
He needs to suck up a lot more. He needs to do a lot more sucking up on that
one. This is basically like inviting your attorney to lunch and hoping that he or she doesn't charge you for their time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is exactly what this is. So one of the great things about Deb, though, is not only is she a consultant, like it's easy to be the consultant, but she's also run a property management business and a maintenance business. And so, Deb, I would just like to kick off first, just give a background of you had a property management business, you sold your property management business. Tell a little bit of your background just for context.
So I started a property management company in 2001, but I was doing self-managing before that. Decided to take it legit because other people started asking if I would, you know how it is. Well, you can manage mine. Do you know so-and-so? You can,
we're still deciding if we want to be legit or not over here at Evernest.
Right. We're just self-managing.
Self-managing, right? For a profit or not for profit. So I did it for like 5%, which, maybe back then that was very, very competitive and probably pretty low. Didn't make any money, but it was just me. So I had no overhead essentially because I did it out of the basement, and I was managing like 35 of my own properties at that time, and just slowly, here and there, taking on duplexes and of other people. So it wasn't difficult. And I had before I even kind of opened my doors to the public, so to speak, I did create the company for our rental properties under the guise that I would hide behind the company and not be the owner. You know what I mean? Like I never owned the properties, but somebody else always owned them. And that person's Yeah. So that I was smart enough, if I could say that was probably the smartest thing I did, was figure out I should probably do that and not be the person to the actual landlord. And it just kind of grew from there. And it just, I made a lot of mistakes. There wasn't a me back then. And I didn't know about like a NARPM or even, IRM or IMN. Like I didn't know any of that stuff. So
you had to learn it all on your own.
I really did. And I'm trying.
Those are expensive mistakes.
That was that long ago, but there was internet, and I'm even trying to remember. Like I don't think I even.
Deb's aging herself right now. All of a sudden, this was before the internet.
Hey, well, in 2001,
we were doing everything.
Some things were before the internet with me.
That's true.
Right. So it all comes after a while. It's all a blur. What year was that again? But no, I didn't. I don't even think I thought to Google like help for. I just don't know how. So I made a lot of mistakes, a lot. And I think through those mistakes, obviously I built processes and policies that worked for my company, and figured out that I wanted to keep doing maintenance because I had started doing maintenance with renovations and flipping. And I really loved that part of it. The hardest part, honestly, was managing people. In the very beginning, I sucked at it. I hated doing it. I just didn't deal with other people's drama very well. And it was very difficult for me having to worry about my own stuff and then having to worry about other people, whether they be residents or owners or even employees. Just building on that it was a little traumatic. I learned a lot.
Did you like the maintenance because it was fairly predictable and the renovation was, and you could see tangible results? What was it that you liked about that?
Honestly, it was probably, that's a really good question. I think it's because it's very black and white. There's no emotion in maintenance. It's, it needs to be repaired. You just get it repaired. I mean, it's pretty easy to say this has to be done. Granted, you have to, creatively tell the narrative to the owner to get it done if it needs to be done. But part of it is just I dived really deep into understanding what had to be done so I could speak intelligently to the owner. That was like the biggest thing for me. I didn't want to just pass on information. Like if I had a contractor or a tech working on something, I literally made them tell me and break it down for me so I understood exactly. I just built my own knowledge base within my head, and kind of from there, like that was what was really important to me.
I am curious, what did you do prior to property management?
Prior to property management, I worked retail. I was in college, and I had for my bachelor's, one of my senior, I had to teach a freshman political science class, and I really enjoyed the educational piece and teaching. So I thought maybe I would do something like that. And then really the property management thing all kind of happened at the same time. I later went and got my MBA, which I'm really glad I did, because I think the way I look at property management today is much more analytical than the emotions that tend to be behind it when you're running a company, and more on metrics and what things I should be looking at to grow the business, what's really important, what data points are important, how to calculate things, like all of the things that I would want my owners to know and be aware of to help build on their NOI and their portfolio.
Yeah, right. If you're going to scale a company, as the company starts to grow, it requires more data, because you can't, your gut is not as, it's still as reliable, but it's not as reliable as it was when you kind of like knew everything that was going on within the organization.
That's true. Yeah.
So I'm curious, you get to see the inside of a lot of property management companies. And so like, what do you, when you look in, are there some like typical problems that you see that just seem to fester up that like most or a large majority of property management companies have?
So I kind of was leading up to this and building into this, what the biggest struggle most property management companies have. And I would say that there is a good delineation between companies under 1,000 doors and those over 1,000 doors. I think when you hit a certain mark, you figured some things out internally, not necessarily with processes or maybe even the numbers or reporting piece of it, but the people piece, because I see the struggle for companies, 300 doors to almost 1,000 that struggle with their people. And it could be a myriad of different things. But in the end, it's kind of that inside drama of making sure everybody understands their exact role and what they have to do within that role. And I'm amazed how many people they maybe created some sort of a job description in the beginning, but it's not at all what maybe the employee is doing today. They don't stick to the job description. They don't build it out with proper metrics and explanations and expectations and things like that. So it's kind of all kind of hell in a handbasket. It's kind of gone awry and nobody has control of anything. So it's really a loss of control. Like the employees are handcuffing the owners because they have all of this knowledge, refusing to use some of the platforms because it's not friendly enough for them to use. They don't know how, there wasn't proper training, and just things get away from you. So that's probably the number one thing. And then, so I just try to come in and get a sense of what's going on, talk to the employees, understand the current organizational structure and job descriptions, processes that are in place. Basically it's the who's touching what, when, and how. Like I'm figuring all of that out.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that when you come in, so many employees don't know really what their role is. Is it because they're doing a little bit of everything because there's always fires burning or something going on?
Well, there is. I will say property management is a very reactive business. We're always reacting to something, whether it's on the resident side or on the owner side. There's always something going on, right? But I think really what it is that as owners of the company, we hire people and we're not great managers. That's not what we went into this business to do. We're not, we might be people, people in person, like we can be friendly to other people, but then to have to manage somebody and hold them to expectations, that's one piece of it. There's the HR side, and then there's the training side. The training side is now I've got to train you on a software that I don't really know how to do. So I'm really hoping that you're smarter than me and that you can figure it out. And then I'm really hoping that when I tell you to go do a move out, that you can just read my mind and know all of the steps, because I don't have time to tell you everything step by step, because I don't do, it's the whole do as I do, not as I say,
right,
or do
right.
as I say,
follow
not
me
as I do.
around, follow me around a couple of times, then you should know how to do it.
Yeah. We'll do one move out together, and then all of a sudden you need to be an expert at it.
You're trained. Yeah. And I hope you're much better at it than I am. And so I'm telling you, I need you to do it this way, even though I didn't do it this way, but I want you to do it this way. And can you figure out how to upload it and put it to the software and make sure the owner's aware? Instantly, we give them all of this autonomy to kind of manage a portfolio without a lot of experience. And so we're entrusting them not just with the asset, but with communication to an owner who is our greatest, that's our money source. That should be a privilege to be able to talk to an owner, not something that you just get to do.
Yeah, things are on fire. And so you hire and you're like, hey, just go beat the fire down, instead of onboarding them and being intentional around training. I like that HR, the middle model of HR and training.
Yeah, that's good.
Being one of the issues because.
Well, go ahead.
I was just going to say, just a quick promotion, the podcast that dropped before this podcast, we actually take on this very issue, Deb, and we talked about the different skill sets it takes to grow your company. And we use revenue as an indicator of when things start to change. But you're absolutely right. The skill sets it takes to go from each step, we talk about it, getting to $1 million. Getting to $1 million is all about how great of a manager you are, a property manager you are. And then getting to 3 million in revenue is all great, is all predicated on exactly what you're talking about, which how great of a manager of people you are. And so we take it through all those.
But to that point though, the only thing I would disagree on is that it can't just be an indicator. The litmus test can't just be the revenue, because you can have two different management companies. One's focused on D-class properties or C-class properties, and another one's focused on only A-plus properties. And so the A-plus is going to generate more revenue naturally, and you don't need as many people. So it's really what type of business are you trying to produce and generate for your client?
Yeah. Thanks,
so
Deb.
We just screwed that whole podcast up.
Yeah, nobody go back and listen.
Hey, don't ever go back.
You knew this about me. I'm not going to agree with you.
It's a complete waste.
Don't listen to that one. Stop. No, but
that's a good point. That's a good point.
I think there's some truth in it. But I think it's also the class of properties. I'm just thinking Memphis, Kansas City, some of these really, I have clients in some of these really rough areas, and they're not as relatable as somebody maybe in California in the Bay. So it's two different types of product. And so you have to hire differently. You have a different skill set. The problems are much different. Some of the things are still the same. Tenants will still complain about certain issues, right? But it's the approach on how you handle it. It's, you might have to be a little bit more aggressive in some areas than you would in others. And some are going to be more tech savvy, some aren't going to be as tech savvy. So I think it really depends. But I will say the real problem universally throughout the country is finding talent that works and fits your vision of whatever you want your company to be and what your expectations are. So with talent being that hardest thing, we tend to hire blindly, even though we've met them and we're interviewing them. We're a little too trusting because we're just hiring people to fix a problem and hoping that that's the right answer. And we don't do our own due diligence and making sure we're hiring the right person. So there should be maybe, I do this for maintenance. So with maintenance, you can hire a lot of people and they can not do a great job. Instead, just maybe test them out on a few work orders and see if and don't give them all the information and see what they come back with. So give them a work order, but maybe just take some pictures, but don't tell them anything else. See how they troubleshoot, see what they come back with, see how well they did, see how long they took. That's the other piece. See if they're thinking outside the box, or are they just going to do exactly what's on the work order? I think that's going to be very telling to how they will be as an employee going forward.
So when you go into these management companies, and if you're evaluating their team, you're evaluating their talent, are you also offering advice like, hey, you have the wrong people on your team, and therefore you need to let 3 people go?
All the time.
Okay.
All the time. But I will be honest, the hardest thing is because I feel like then they're wasting their time and money with me if I'm not going to be honest and tell them, because there's only so much I can do. If I'm going to be hit with a roadblock and it's an employee whose feet are in the sand, they've been there 20 years and they're like, you don't need her. We don't need to change. We're good. But there clearly is a problem and they won't get rid of them because it's their mom. Then we have a problem.
Wow. If you're listening and Deb just consulted with you and you're not firing your mom, it's like you need to let her go.
No, but that is hard. It's hard because I said it earlier. It's an emotional thing it's easy for me to come in. I'm unemotionally attached. I'm looking at things more factually. I'm looking at the entire scope of the company holistically, but I'm also saying, okay, for a company your size, what is realistic and how you want your company to be structured? Then we build it out from there, not including any of your current people. And then we're going to build out the functions within that role. We're pretty much starting from scratch. And then who do you want in that role? Now we're going to look at your people. And after I've met them and after you know them, it's pretty much clear as mud at that point to say, you're right, so-and-so is not a good fit. And that is very difficult for them to make those decisions. But it's really, where do you want to go with the company? Either you're handcuffed and you're going to stay where you're at, and you sell to Matthew and then he inherits the problem, or go from there.
He'll do your dirty work for you. Oh gosh. I had a funny conversation with a potential seller the other day, and they said, well, you have a reputation that you just come in and fire everybody. And I'm like, no, that's not the reputation about you. That's not the reputation I want. But we do have high expectations about who's going to work with us. And so if people's team, if the seller's team is fantastic, then we're going to keep those people around, because like you said, we have as hard a time finding talented people as anybody. And so one of the things I wanted to make is actually the point that you made, is that growing can be a pain, could be the worst thing for some companies. And if you're not willing to make tough decisions about your personnel, right? Like maybe it was a partner that started the business with you, and the business as it grows starts to outgrow the ability for that partner to provide value. Then you're choosing, by not replacing that partner or replacing that team member, to stay where you are, but you need to be intentional about staying, and be intentional. If you want to grow, then you're going to have to continue to up-level the talent in your organization. Yeah. So what I do is when a company wants to work with me, it's like a 2 to 3 week discovery period. I go in and I dive in to every part of their business, their P&Ls, their marketing campaign, their employees, the whole structure, their financials, obviously, and looking at their revenue and their expenses and all of that. And I take that time to meet with the key employees that really are decision makers in their area, learn a little bit about them, learn about how they're doing the job. Because I know all of the roles, I know questions to ask on how they do something, and I'm listening for what's missing or what they, didn't tell me, essentially, as part of the process. I'm kind of discerning their attitude, discerning also where I see them. It's kind of like I'm a walking cultural index a little bit. I can pretty much tell
when somebody's really vested in and bought into the company, drinking the Kool-Aid, versus someone who is on a power trip versus someone who's just there to collect a paycheck. So there's kind of those buckets that I need to, those avatars that I'm trying to figure out where they go and how to play them into the company. And then that allows me to, at the end, I'm evaluating the company. That's just one piece of it. The staffing is a piece, and maintenance and everything. And then I put together a report for the owners that have hired me. We sit down, we have a very long meeting, and we go over everything section by section. Part of what I do is I'll also value their business on where they are today. So I'll run an EBITDA model, and I'll run a market value model as well. And so I'm giving them an idea of, here's where you're at today. And here's these, if we make all of these changes off of my recommendations, here's where we probably could be and what that increase could look like. Because I'm also looking at what their increase has been year over year for the past 3 years. And that will be an indicator on where there's an opportunity to move the needle and who's holding them back or what's holding them back.
And so like the first thing you would come into Evernest is you'd say in the first hour, you'd know you need to get rid of Spencer. Number one.
I saw her looking at me when she said that. She goes,
that's all I could think.
Who's on a power trip?
Well, Matthew, what I would do for you is cut all the dead weight. And so I know who the dead weight is. I can smell dead weight even over Zoom, like right now.
It's always marketing. It's always marketing. It's the dead weight.
Just cut the marketing. That's right. That's easy. So I'm interested, like, what are the areas that this report covers? It sounds like maintenance. Can you kind of give us like a high level section?
Yeah, I can. So I go over their marketing. So the marketing, including the website. So I will look at the current website. I'll evaluate that. I'll do a benchmark comparison against their top 4 to 5 competitors in the market. So I'm evaluating them against their competitors. And then I'm diving into each, I call it kind of high, there's like 4 buckets in property management. There's the leasing and marketing, there's property management, which can, entails a lot. And then there's maintenance and accounting. So I'm going through each role. So the organizational chart, understanding who kind of covers each of those areas and what they're doing. And then I'll ask, so if I'm talking, and everybody does this differently, so there's no right or wrong answer. You can have a leasing agent doing your application processing, or you can have somebody in property management, like your assistant property manager. Whoever's doing it, I want to make sure I understand how they're doing, the application processing. Tell me what things you look for. What are you evaluating? And I'm trying to see how well they know something. I'm also gauging to see whether or not the team knows the lease. Do they know the management contract? Like these little things tell me, again, what's their buy-in into the company and the longevity that I can see them, how long they've been there, and their legacy knowledge. So I'm going over staffing. The maintenance is a big one. Reviewing work order count, trying to figure out then on the revenue side, their customer acquisition cost, what their revenue per unit is, and where the growth is and what their profit margin is. So I'm kind of running all of those numbers for them. And so that's kind of one of the first things that they'll see is right away is all of their current numbers broken out, including what their company is worth today, if they were to maybe think about selling it. And sometimes that changes the whole narrative of the whole conversation. They're like, you know what, I think I'm out. And right. Because it is hard work. This is kind of like, I'm giving you a report card, and what I'm going to tell you is, and a roadmap. So I'm actually building out a whole separate roadmap, kind of like a Gantt chart, just building everything out to say, here's where we're going to start with weeks 1, 2, 3. Like I map it all out, and they have to realize that it's a lot of work. And the first thing I usually do is the most mentally draining thing, but I work on a couple of things simultaneously. I'll work on the job descriptions and refining those roles for them, because that usually is never there. And then making sure it fits into an accountability chart, and we're mapping that out, building the foundation and kind of scrapping everything and then putting it all back together. So it's a little mind numbing for them, but the hardest part for me is getting them to invest their own time because they're so busy. Oh. So I'm committed to do it, but then oftentimes they have to push a meeting out, or I can't do it this week. And so things can get delayed and it makes it really difficult.
I can remember when I was first growing the business, I would come in on Saturdays because on Saturdays, things in this world stop. And that was my day to just devote to working on the business. Everybody's heard that, working on the business, not in the business, which is an E-Myth thing. But you're right. Like, it's so busy during the week. Like, if somebody thinks they're going to grow and create all these systems and develop their business in a, 8 to 5 Monday through Friday world, it's just not going to happen. It's just way too complicated for it to get done like that.
There's very few things. So I've always said that growth is actually the easy part. It's really not that difficult. You just have to make sometimes a few changes and then things will start kind of churning, right? So maybe I make some marketing changes on my website, or maybe I make a concerted effort to answer a few emails that come to me. And then all of a sudden that starts going. But when that happens, the struggle is you can grow your company. You can hire a great BDM and think that's your solution and that you want to grow. But if your internal operations is falling apart, you're going to implode, and then you're just going to piss off people before they even get to you. So
yep, we've done that before.
Sure.
We've
done that, wrote the
we've had some great marketing, some great salespeople, and then we just flub it when we bring them in the door, and it's just like all that work for naught.
So that's the second point of the question, Spencer, to your one question. So the first is what I usually see. The second is because a lot of people are like, I want to grow. They all, Matthew's heard it too. We'll go to these conferences and that's kind of like the focus is growth and all of this and how you get there. And that's great. Obviously, isn't that the podcast name, right? To grow, to get to this, to there. That's really not the hard part. That's actually, to me, the easiest part. Yes, there's some work that has to be done in getting you to that point, but not in comparison to the work that has to be done internally to make the operations work.
Don't tell Matthew that's the easy part. Do not tell Matthew. You just told him that I had the easiest job.
We already knew that.
You know what makes his job hard though? Doing what you said earlier, Matthew, when he's like, I got all these owners, they're all great. And then he has to deal with the calls from the owners who are like, you told me that they would do this and they didn't do that. So there's that disconnect from handing that off. Okay, so now he's blaming you. So there you go.
Deb, we actually put that on our leadership company scorecard, is how many houses dropped out from signed management agreement to leased. And that was one of our key indicators. And so we watched that number for that very reason, right? Like, you can sell and get everybody excited, and then if you can't bring those houses in the door, and we read that book, what was it called, Spencer? The How to Never Lose Another Customer, about essentially the onboarding process. And boy, it just kind of like changed our world. But we go in and out of being really good at this, really bad at it. What we did find, which is kind of a pro tip, is your best property managers probably ought to be on the onboarding process, not running the day-to-day PM world once a house is rented, because there are so many times where a property manager has to go out of process just to get a house maybe on the market, kind of get it out of that risky zone, that you'd really need somebody that understands how to get it out of the process and then get it back into the process as quickly as possible.
Your point, because I'm aware of how big you guys are, and I would probably have looked at and I don't know all the internal structure of your team, but for somebody where you're at your size or getting to be your size, that's where you actually have people that have specific responsibilities on, okay, you have somebody that's bringing in the business, and then somebody's job is to make sure for maybe 90 days that they that's right. Maybe they get a welcome gift. I don't know, but they do whatever it takes. They're customer service focused, and they're making sure that owner is onboarded 100%. And it's a smooth transition. So maybe that's a 90-day rule. And then it moves into your property manager, and then your property manager is taking care of it. But then you have to have an asset manager, and an asset manager is the one who's going to do your quarterly review with your owners. And they're going to team with the property manager, and the asset manager is going to call the owners in that portfolio every single quarter. And they're going to go over basically it's like a financial review. How did, like an advisor, how did we do last quarter? How did we do in maintenance? How did we do in accounting? How did we do in property management? How did we do in leasing? Hitting those 4 tiers. And then when you do that, you're building this relationship of trust with an owner who then feels like, this is great. I can buy more properties. Again, here's that growth. It becomes easy. If I just buy one more property, if every single one of your owners bought one more property, you double in size. So that makes it easy. And then that maybe leads into another team, maybe like an acquisitions team internally for clients. Like there's all these opportunities to make this such a smooth one-stop shop transition. We just don't do any of that proactive reaching out, review and building that relationship. And then when maintenance hits, which it does throughout the entire life cycle from the beginning to the end, owners are frustrated with us and we wonder why. We're asking them for money, hundreds of dollars. We don't know what their budget is. We don't know what their goals are with the property, but we're asking them to spend money constantly over and over again.
So we don't do that with every client. We do it with our bigger clients.
I saw you taking notes though.
We do it on a very
sounds like a great idea.
Yeah. So I would be curious.
So So let me ask you this: but what's a big client versus a small client? Why are you profiling it that way? Why wouldn't you treat everybody the same?
So I was going to ask you some questions about this. My question to you is, you're saying if I have one house, one owner, then I need to have our PM or me as the PM, I need to have a conversation with that owner once a quarter.
No, an asset manager.
Well, are you talking a smaller company size or your company size, Matthew?
Both.
Okay.
300 to 1,000.
It doesn't matter. I would say any, if you have one door or 10 doors, you need to do an account review every quarter. And that property manager who, the best delineation I can think of is a property manager is the one who has the owner relationship. They're keeping up with the client. They're the ones who are handling the difficult decisions, having conflict resolution skills, escalation issue skills. They're the ones that are having those hard conversations to be able to, articulate how the last quarter went with that owner. It's also building kind of like it's career building, like it's challenging my team. Yeah. So that's something as well.
Well, I think it's great. I'm just sitting here doing the math. And if I did one a quarter, and let's say a property manager manages, 300 homes for 300 clients, that basically boils down to every working day, they need to have 4 conversations with owners, proactive conversations.
They shouldn't be long conversations. If you're doing them every quarter, they're 15-minute reviews, 15-20-minute reviews. So
that's an hour a day I'm spending on my review, or maybe.
But remember, I have an assistant property manager that's supporting me and some of this back office stuff. So I should have the time to do it.
Yeah. That's awesome. I like it a lot. I mean, again, we are having those conversations with bigger owners, and you shamed me for just having them with bigger owners. So tail tucked between my legs, I'm going to go crack the whip and start asking everybody to have a conversation every quarter.
It's got to cut down on churn, right?
It does. It cuts down on churn. It's that piece as well. But sometimes what's our biggest complaint? It's these small owners. They take up the most amount of our time.
Right.
So how do we also educate them on giving them, like, if we start doing these recaps with them, they'll slowly back off. That micromanaging slowly goes away. And they're getting educated on now it's an investment and it's not a emotional, it's very transactional for them. And now if I can take the emotion out and it's a business transaction more than just, this was my mother's home and now my home and maybe my children's home, like it is, but this is, an asset. And even if it's an accidental landlord, I think the experience that you give them will far outreach anything else.
That's great stuff. I'd love to pivot right here. And what questions do most property managers have for you? I kind of asked you the question when you dig into a property management company, what is like clearly the thing, but what questions do most property managers have for you?
What questions do you have for me?
Why do you keep turning this back on me? I'm the one that asked.
We just solved
my
problem.
Show, Deb. You can't have this show. I already gave up the Evernest real estate investor show, and now Deb's going to come in and run this show.
That's right.
You mean the owner of the company? What do they usually ask me?
Yeah. Like where are their where do they perceive their pain points are?
Their pain points are revenue and staffing.
Revenue meaning like I'm not making enough money.
Mm-hmm. Or I'm not making any money, and I can't pay myself, but I pay everybody else. What's going on? What am I doing wrong? I'm drinking the Kool-Aid and I bought into everything. I'm listening to every podcast. I'm going to every conference.
Well, they're not listening to our podcast if they're not making any money.
But they're asking, you can literally, and sometimes that's wrong, right? Where you almost buy in too much on everything. So you have to really take the time. It's not one size fits all. So the way you run a company is not the way that somebody, Michael is going to run a company with Atrium. Michael and Adam, they're going to run it differently, but that's okay.
Well, they're wrong. Those guys are wrong, actually. Michael and Adam are definitely wrong. Kidding. Love those guys. Gosh. No, but you're right. That's the whole thing about all the like you go to a NARPM convention or go to one of these IMN property management conferences, and everybody feels like they do it the best way. And so how do you discern like whether that way works for you or not? And that's kind of a hard thing to do, especially when you're early in the business. Like you kind of
when you're early in the business, it's like you're a sponge and you're taking in everything. And that's where a lot of mistakes happen is they're trying too much. The concern I have is when you go in and to the vendor trade show because you've heard somebody on stage say a couple, give you a few ideas of who to use, and they go sign up, and then they're locked into some of these subscriptions and they can't get out. And now that's money that they have invested, but their team is invested. And so you have to figure out what that buy-in is. So there really should be some thought before you go to a conference. And the goal is to try to get as many nuggets as you can, but then bring them back to see what's going to work.
We actually did a podcast, a little quick promotion again on how to do a conference, like how to go do it. But the thing is like going in there with your pain points and saying, I want to solve these, and then putting your blinders on.
Yeah.
Like, don't sell me all these other things that I need that I didn't even know I had a pain until I walked in and you presented me with this pain. But I've got these like clear 2 or 3 pain points. I want to find the experts there. I want to talk to the experts. I want to go to all the speakers that are talking about that, and then maybe talk to the vendors. Definitely talk to the vendors that maybe focus on that pain point, right?
So I have a question for you. Of all the the management companies that you buy, what percentage of the owners stay in the company?
So far, only Dodson's crew did.
So
one out of 29. So that's 3%.
Let me ask you this: of those, so 28 did not. What was their biggest pain point on selling to you? Like, why did they sell?
Yeah, so they kind of fall into 2 buckets. One is somebody's retiring, so they've gotten to the point where they're like, "Hey, I need to retire. I need to get out." The other one is somebody that has something else they'd rather do than manage property. They feel like property management, they just don't make enough money doing it, and this other thing's going to make them more money, and so they're basically selling the ball and chain, so to speak, to go chase this other opportunity.
Which is where I come in, because I think that's where a lot of people then they either do what they're going to sell to you type of thing, or they're going to come and bring me in, and either I can help them turn it around. The thing is for them is that they feel like it's a lot of work for little return. And they haven't been able to pull themselves out to look at it from a different view and figure out what can be fixed. So they're so engrossed and enmeshed in all of it, they can't separate those feelings.
Yeah, I agree. Something's going on. Maybe one day I'll share in the business right now where I'm literally getting essentially a mad client email about once an hour right now. Because they've figured out what my email is, and then I've got a mad client emailing me. And so it's like, I get like, if that was the only piece of the business, then I would be like overwhelmed and frustrated and I wouldn't be sleeping. Since it's not the only piece of the business, then it's easier for me to sleep at night. But the point is like, when you're in that kind of like negative loop, it's kind of hard to see the forest for the trees. It's hard to be able to zoom out.
It's a hamster wheel, and
how do I fix this?
And they can't figure out how to get off of that and look at it differently.
Yeah. And that really is a mind shift in going from being the best property manager, because that's what's gotten you there. And as the business grows, there's only so many signs you can put in the yard, only so many walkthroughs, only so many client consultations you can have. And then at some point, you've got to start handing those pieces off. And if you decide that's what you want to do, then, consulting with Deb makes a lot of sense, because she's just seen a lot of these transitions. And frankly, it's a hard change, right? Because you're such a great doer, and then all of a sudden you're starting to give that away to people on your team.
Well, most property managers have control issues, right? They want to control.
It's the whole reason we got into the business, because nobody did it for our properties as well as we did.
Right. So we control everything soup to nuts. Only I can do it. I'm the only person that knows and understands this client. I'm the only one that understands this market. But it's not scalable.
Yeah.
It's amazing how often Matthew comes and tries to tell me how to do marketing. He's still a control freak.
Well, that's because I'm an expert at marketing.
Oh my gosh.
Just look at some of my early videos.
Deb, if I showed you the website when I came on board, you would love it.
It was awesome. Sure. It truly was awesome. I'm actually thinking about going back to it. It was so awesome.
You should.
You'll get more angry emails. Keep going.
Listen, it's one day I'll share some of this 0 to 1. We're starting a new business, and it's we're having a hard time getting out of the gate. Let's just say that. Well, Deb, this has been really great. Spencer, any other questions for Deb?
No, that's it. This has been fantastic. So Deb, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you and reach out and say, hey, come and help us figure out our problems before we sell it to Evernest, how can they get in touch with you?
Or how can I make more money before I sell it to Evernest?
They can do that. They can do that too. That's true.
Yeah.
Competitors. I feel like we're competitors now, Deb. I don't know if we'll ever drop this episode. I'm kidding.
So they can
tell us how.
So my website's really simple. It's propertymanagementconsulting.com. It's really easy. You can schedule a meeting with me on there. My phone number's on there. So makes it really easy to get a hold of me.
And I'm a huge believer in what Deb's doing. I've just heard tons of great things from all of our clients, and they continue to refer her more clients. So huge fan of Deb's.
Except Matthew, who knows it all. He hasn't quite.
He hadn't yet, right? This is our free consultation.
No,
so maybe
here's the thing.
Right.
I give Matthew a lot of free consultations, so he gets a lot of stuff for free.
He does.
Deb, you do. You're awfully good to me, Deb. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
All right. Thanks, Deb. Thanks for being here. This has been great. Listen, I want to ask you, if you're listening to this, I want to ask you to do something a little bit different. Matthew and I got some marketing advice from our friend Peter Lohman the other day. Yep. And he had a great point, didn't he, Matthew? He said,
you guys are idiots. You ought to be doing this. And we're like, yeah, actually, we should be doing that.
But we've been asking for reviews, and reviews are great, but we would prefer if you went and signed up for our newsletter. So we do have a property manager newsletter we send out. We do? We're starting it as soon as somebody signs up for it.
Yeah,
we need one subscriber. No, we've sent it out before. I promise. If you go to
the one you charted 5 years ago.
No. Let me finish.
Okay.
Go to evernest.co/PM newsletter, and you will be able to sign up, and we'll get you on there. We do have somebody working on this. Lucas has been working on this, Matthew. He has sent some out. So we'll be sending you a newsletter. So we're going to ask you to sign up for our newsletter, and we'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of 300 to 3000.